Hey y'all, it's Michaela, just here to introduce you to this week's episode that we did with Dr. Talia Prussin. It was recorded back in August, I want to say. It's been a minute, basically. Talia Prussin is an old professor of mine here at UBC. She is absolutely delightful. She was quite possibly one of, if not the favorite prof I've ever had. She was just so much fun and just so full of information and so helpful. She's taught me several classes. I loved her, everyone. I loved doing Greek with her, where it was just chaos every time. But one day, I walked into class and she was talking about her research and I was like, you must come on the show and speak about this. And she agreed. So thus we got her and all her information on the Seleucids and how they did empire during the Hellenistic series. You can probably tell that I was planning on having her be one of our conversation guests for the Hellenistic series. And since I have expanded that exponentially, it's gone a little sideways in terms of my planning. But that being said, I think it is incredibly important that you guys get this information. Liv, Talia, and I were a little bit in chaos mode, which I think just happens when you have three women all at similar ages together with similar references. But we had a lot of fun and talked a lot about the Seleucids and the Hellenistic period and all that. So without further ado, here you are. Conversations. The Empire is back, and this episode is the Seleucids with Dr. Talia Prussin.
Okay, we are here today, and really it's Michaela who's going to be taking the reins on this conversation. Because I know only the bare basics of what we're talking about and that I'm excited about it. Michaela, do you want to take it away?
If I must.
What's the plan?
God, I know, but you told me this plan half an hour ago and I was like,
well,
okay.
I mean, you didn't tell me what we were talking about, so I think you knew it was the plan.
I forgot.
Well, okay. I mean, I can start things off. I know that we're talking about the Hellenistic period as the overall theme, because that's what we're doing a little bit of a series on. And by that, I mean, Michaela's doing a series on, and I'm just going to be the voice of it. But specifically, I think the thing that interests me most, because I don't know a ton about the Hellenistic period, but what I do know is that the Greeks went on a bit of a colonization spree. And that, I believe, is kind of where
Greeks,
we're at.
Macedonian Greeks. I'm not getting into this argument. Yep. Actually. You know what?
The people post Alexander the Great in the region.
Yeah, so basically, I remember, I feel like I walked into class late, and Talia, was explaining to our class the research you do, and I was just like, oh, you need to come speak about this. And from what I recall and what I remember, it was basically post Seleucid rule, where Greek rule in Asia, and how there's like a disconnect from like the land, where Persia was such like a landed empire with like the space it was. You can absolutely jump in at whatever point and correct me. It is my morning as well. Persia was such like a land thing, and how the Greeks didn't have sort of like, I think what stuck out to me was that connection to the land. The Greeks didn't have that land connection. And yeah, so why don't you just introduce the topic better than me going land, Persia, Greece.
I mean, honestly, that is the heart of it. It's me showing up with holding a book, going, land, Persia, Greece? Please read. So my current book project is thinking about how a ruling imperial dynasty's claims to its territory affect how it manages land. So basically, the idea of land both as territory that you rule over, but land also as property that people own, that the king owns, that can be given to people to create relationships. In my mind, particularly between the state and the people that it rules. So I'm really interested in the transition of power between the Achaemenid Persian Empire in Western and Central Asia and the Seleucids, who ruled that same area, minus Egypt. They have to give that up, that goes to Ptolemy, after Alexander the Great's conquests. The Persians have, the Iranian plateau as their homeland, a place that they have actual hereditary claim to. Although we can sort of get into how strange the ideological construction of the Achaemenids is, because I'm sort of obsessed with that. But we're going to sidebar that for now. Whereas the Seleucids basically come into West and Central Asia with only sort of the right of conquest. Because Alexander conquered those territories, the Seleucid kings can now rule them. And that is a much harder situation because they do not have a stable base of power. Now, you could say, well, there are Greek cities in Western Turkey, Western Asia Minor, that had been there for a really long time. Why can't the Seleucids use that as their base of power? And part of that is simply that those cities are constantly shifting hands in terms of who controls them, because they are so desirable in terms of location, in terms of what trade they control, partly because they are incredibly independent. And as we know from classical Greek history, they don't really want to be ruled by anyone. They want to do their own thing. So trying to control those cities as your base of power is a losing enterprise. So what the Seleucids do is that they establish what Paul Cosman calls two panels of colonies in northern Syria and then in what's now Iraq, so Mesopotamia. And using those regions, they control the entire empire. So what's really interesting about this is that that essentially positions Seleucid power deep into Asia, but what classicists like to talk about when they talk about the Seleucid Empire is what's happening in Asia Minor, in what's now Turkey, which we have a lot of evidence for, particularly in Greek, but that isn't the Seleucid homeland. That's honestly peripheral to a lot of what they're doing. So one of the big pushes in Seleucid studies in the last 30 years, and the success of this is, I think, open to debate. So based on this big landmark work by Amelie Kurt and Susan Sherwin-White, they tried to recenter, particularly Mesopotamia, as some of the most important Seleucid activity. And that means thinking about a part of the world that we don't normally think of as Greek. And it pushes the study of Seleucid history into a part of the world that we normally put in a different discipline, into Near Eastern studies.
Yeah.
But the Near Eastern studies folks don't want to be studying that period. Some of them do. And I am a huge fan of those people. They do amazing work. But because it's Greek rule, they have essentially said, oh, this is not part of our discipline. And the classicists look at a kingdom that is based so far east from Greece, and they say, well, that's probably also not part of our discipline. And a lot of the material isn't in Greek. And most people don't want to sit down and learn Akkadian or Aramaic. That's a lot of time. And to be reading in a language that isn't Greek or Latin is in many ways definitionally not part of classics. So you have this empire that is enormous and essentially peripheral to academic study. So I was deeply compelled by that because I love things that no one else cares about. That's my passion. I was like, oh, no one else wants this? It's weird and hard. This has to be my jam. So I'm interested in thinking about how trying to negotiate this weird set of sources, where some of it is in non-Greco-Roman languages, some of it is in Greek. It all fits together really strangely, gives us a really different view of a world and how we can see that world as being fundamentally different from what the Persians were doing before Alexander's conquest, and how this idea of the right of conquest shapes how you build an empire.
This is sorry. I have a quick clarifying question, because this is so interesting, and like I had no idea that the Seleucid Empire was that big. Which sounds like
it's like the biggest one, isn't it?
The issue. Well, but like it being the biggest one and it being that big is like, that to me is like quite, it's unexpected. Yeah. Well, I mean, sure. But yeah, it's big.
Look, Seleucus and his family, they got the good sized land.
I mean, it's a lot of land. But so just, I want to clarify like how the kind of the span of, or the space that we're talking about. So you said Mesopotamia. So like, are we talking like Iraq, modern Iraq broadly? Or like, I know Mesopotamia obviously went around in borders and things. So, but like as far as Iraq, are we talking about?
Originally it goes all the way into Afghanistan.
Wow.
So past Iraq.
That's huge.
That's huge.
So far from the Med. That's just so interesting.
The one disclaimer I have to put on this is that the Seleucids do not control all of that land for the entire span of their lifetime as a dynasty.
That makes sense. How could you with that much land and you're one dynasty that conquered? Like, wow.
So the weird truism that we have sort of been batting around about the Seleucids for most of the last century is this idea of the Seleucids as a perennially crumbling empire. I don't agree with this, but it is definitely how the Seleucids are regularly portrayed. Just a very weak state. Because they have so much territory, because they often have to make strategic concessions or rule through like client kings, they usually get portrayed as not exactly puppet kings, but they're portrayed as sort of the Ottoman Empire of I'm making a World War I comparison. This is very bad. Is this relatable? They are the Ottoman Empire of the Hellenistic period, in that we talk about the sick man of Europe when we talk about sort of the lead up to the First World War, and that's this idea that the Ottoman Empire is falling apart at the end of the 19th century. This is a very relatable metaphor when I'm trying to talk to modern historians. I'm in a history department, so I have to do that now. It's not relatable for people who care about the ancient world.
Condolences.
Sorry. So this idea of the Seleucids as a weak state who are perennially losing territory and getting smaller and smaller and smaller is not precisely accurate, and it's very unproductive. But I have to slap that asterisk on it, because if I don't, and I just let you believe that it's this whole expanse, I will feel the breath at the back of my neck someone ready to, well, actually, my take there.
Yeah.
No, but that makes sense though, because also I'm really a classical and pre-classical gal. Anything after the playwrights, and I'm kind of out. But so just, yeah, excuse my lack of knowledge. But like we're probably the Seleucids must have also ruled for like a couple centuries at least, right? Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about a long period of time, an enormous amount of land, and the way they got it being pretty. I mean, I would imagine fairly difficult to hold with any kind of like certainty. So that makes so much sense.
Yeah. So what I was kind of picking up on was sort of like, this is like the gong I want to ring when talking about the Hellenistic period, is how about, and also like why it often gets left out of discussions, is it's not Greek enough in a way, like, and so it's just like, you know, it's like it's the not metropolitan, that's not the word I'm looking for, but it's the like
Cosmopolitan
mixing pot mosaic-y time where it's all these different, there's so much interaction happening, and it's so obvious. Like, you can't just be like, look at the Greeks doing the Greek thing. It's like, no, there are Greeks in this area, there are, you know, Egyptians in this area, they're, you know, they're all, it's like it's the old white men who want Greece to stay Greece, mad because Greece isn't staying Greece, and it's like, oh, wild how that happens.
It's almost like the Med was an enormously interconnected place in the ancient world and lasted thousands and thousands of years, and it wouldn't be just all about one type of people, because that would be crazy.
Who would have thought?
It's almost like it's my like all of the time need to respond to remind everyone that there are also like loads of different types of people living on land 3,000 years ago, and that doesn't give any certain one group the right to it today. It's fine. But that's so that's so interesting.
And it's just also because like I just got finished reading Danelle's book Classicism and Other Phobias, and it's like that discussion of like what is classics, and can other cultures have classics, and how do you define classics. And so like I've been enjoying studying the Hellenistic period now, because I like how hard like that punctures sort of the facade of what classics is, because you can't just sit there and be like, look at the Athenians and Spartans doing these things. It's so much bigger.
I do think this is part of why it's understudied.
Yeah. It's racism, actually, I think.
Yes. It's a version of the ancient world where you have to acknowledge that the ancient world was deeply multicultural, that it involved navigating cultural differences and linguistic differences and all sorts of sort of poly and hyphenate identities that many people in the modern day are still deeply, deeply uncomfortable with. And if we look at classical Athens, it's easier to pretend that it's a very homogenous society. Was it? No. But you can lie to yourself more easily.
Truly.
No, for real. And I just want to like, I don't need to defend myself, but I just want to say that the reason why I prefer classical and pre-classical is only because I just want the mythology. And post that, they've already established it, and people are figuring out science and stuff, and I'm just uninterested. So, but I love the idea of the multiplicity of the Med, and like all of that I do love.
Well, I sometimes, like when I see like the writings in the Hellenistic period about myth, I'm like, these are the Madeline Millers of antiquity.
And like, so they have value, but they're not mythology.
This is their mythological fiction writing that they're having fun with.
I do have to say, part of why I work on the Hellenistic period is because I don't have to read as many literary texts.
Yeah, see, we're just opposites. That's fine.
Yeah, it's completely complementary.
We just have different, everyone wants a different thing.
We need the people who are happy to do the economic stuff, because I don't want to do it. Yeah. I don't want to do it.
This is one of my favorite taglines that I was given by okay, I'm not going to specify who told me this.
Fair.
But someone who is near and dear to me said, "I'm so glad that you're doing this work because I don't want to." And it was one of those moments where I was just like, this is really definitional of the tiny subset of research that I picked for myself. It's work that no one else wanted to do. That's very interesting, but it's I love to struggle.
Good. I mean, that part's relatable.
Yeah.
I mean, so love is relative, but I do.
Most of my sources are things like inscriptions. I do some work with papyri, not a ton because I mostly don't work on Egypt. I work with some of the like more fragmentary histories. I spend too much time trying to track down, here's the one quote we have from this guy whose text is entirely lost. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Into Brill's New Jacoby. Jacoby is the collection of fragments of lost Greek historians. So it's where you go to suffer and get not enough information.
Love it.
And I also work with coins. I really love finding things in languages that I can't read. So one of my current article projects is on Seleucid imperialism in the Persian Gulf. And this took me into reading about Sabaic inscriptions. Sabaic is, I believe, a Southern Arabian language. Okay. It's in like the Semitic language family. I cannot read it. These are inscriptions that were found in what's now Yemen. But one of them includes a guy who also sacrificed and set up an inscription on one of the Cycladic islands. And I was like, wait, sorry, what's happening?
Whoa. Yeah.
Right? For a really long time, they thought it was two different guys who were maybe related, but they've redated one of the texts, so now they think it's the same guy. So the idea that someone is an actor both in the Cyclades and in Yemen is just so exciting to me.
Yeah.
But it also makes so much sense for the Hellenistic period too. I'm like, that's like, when I think of the Hellenistic period, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. There are going to be people who are bouncing all over the place having power. Like they
just a shocking level of mobility.
Yes.
In a world that we think of as not very mobile.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, something we need to start pushing back against. Because there's certainly periods where people are not moving long distances very often, but I think by the Hellenistic period, after Alexander, you just see a completely different conception of space and distance.
I mean, that's even clear in the mythology. And I mean, I do want to get specifically into the Seleucids and the colonization aspects, but like that, just hearing you say that, that's so true in the mythology too. And I love when I come across that. Like the reference point I can think of most is that, there's like a certain period of time where anything mythological written after that point is like Dionysus went to India. Because Alexander went to India and they suddenly knew what India was and they had all of these amazing things to work with. And so Dionysus went to India. And to me, it becomes like this very easy determiner on like what the mythology is that says that, where it's coming from, kind of what the background is. Like you hear an elephant, you hear India, and you're like, okay, like I can situate this. And it's so, it's just such an interesting thing to be so obviously reminded of, like, the travel that was going on, just the absolute like connectivity of it.
Yeah. And I really, like, I think I've been really fascinated with the Alexander romance. Like, I'm not going to touch on this at all in the Hellenistic period because I'm like, it needs its own thing. But this idea, because Alexander went to so many places and hit so many different cultures, this conception of him is different in different parts of the world, and sort of like he's still this like kind of like hero-y guy and like hero character, I guess, but the way that his stories change in different cultures. And so I don't know if I've talked with you about this, but it's the Alexander romance is essentially how he appears in different it's really really interesting. But it's also really interesting when you think of like what's it called, like just myth studies generally, how stories travel cultures and what people pull from different sources, and or like what matters more to certain people and certain cultures, and blah blah blah. I'm going off topic. But so yeah, when you're talking about sort of like the Seleucids and the Achaemenids, what I was curious about is how much of, because after like Alexander he was becoming very like how do they refer to it, like Persianized, almost like he was adopting a lot of like Persian things. And so did the Seleucid dynasty, were they similar to this in that way? Because the Achaemenids had quite, I think, landed power. They had the areas that did give them trouble, but for the most part they did a pretty good job of ruling their empire. I did quotes. They managed empire well enough. Compared where you were saying the Seleucids, where it's sort of that appearance of them, that weak idea of them, but it's like, were they trying to, did they take lessons from the Achaemenids essentially and try to emulate that, or is that something they were avoiding?
That is a great question. I think the extent to which the Seleucids take lessons from the Achaemenids, which I think is quite large, is part of why they get portrayed as a weak empire. I have some questions, sort of skipping back to Alexander. I have some question in my mind about how much Persianization of Alexander in our sources is a way of portraying him as being corrupted by his own rule, by power,
by Eastern opulence.
Yes.
Orientalizing, we might call
it. But it's in some ways it's a very Roman way of portraying the demise of a ruler. And because all of our sources on Alexander are so much later than Alexander, I think the earliest one we get is like 300 years later.
Really?
Yeah.
This is my history lack of knowledge coming out. Really?
Yeah, we lost all of the Alexander sources that were remotely proximate to him. Because we lost a lot of Hellenistic literature. The second sophistic wasn't feeling it. They were like, we don't vibe. Throw it out.
This is a term I've only heard of vaguely. Is there like an easy definition of that?
For the second sophistic?
Yeah.
To me, this is the term that I tend to use to describe this sort of 2nd century CE movement of Roman intellectuals who are very into Hellenism and the Greek world and being Greek through, education. But they're very into the sort of classical Athenian model.
Something new and different.
Yes. They wanted the golden age of Greek culture. And they are sort of the first funneling down of ancient sources, where the things that they decided were valuable stayed, and the things that they were not interested in tend to fall out of the record. And, we get a second narrowing later on with like medieval monks only copying certain texts. But this is, I think, the first time we see a major selective process happening where it's just it's much more intense than just some things maybe weren't as popular contemporarily, where you lose a
real
lot of
loss. Like they actually like chose to.
Yes.
Yeah, got it. No, I'm glad I asked. Thank you. Because I've heard the term, but I've also but that's an important moment, and it's one of those things where I know generally that it's happening, but I'm glad to have an example.
It's made very invisible, I think, a lot of times, because that's intellectual history is not something that we as classicists have historically invested a lot of time in, although that's massively changing. There's a huge flourishing of sort of history of science right now, that's really interesting, which to me is one of those I'm so glad you're doing that work so I don't have to
Yep.
moments. I knew a bunch of people who worked on Akkadian astronomy. I was just like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Glad you're doing that. So I don't have to,
want to. I just want to learn about it. Yeah.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
Give me the 5-year-old appropriate version.
Yeah. That's why I love having these conversations. Just like you're providing that for us right now, and it's the best part of these conversations is that people will just come on and we'll spend like an hour and a half just learning all their stuff, and then and then I get to know it without having to do the work. So thanks. But like I know, that's what the fun of like having so many people doing such interesting work. Yeah.
Oh, Alexander, the Persianization.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay, so
lessons.
Backing up.
Yes.
So I do think that the Seleucids really strongly draw on certain Achaemenid ideas. And the sort of orthodox position within the field is that the Seleucids kept basically all the institutional structures of rule that the Seleucids had, that the Persians had established. And there have been occasional pushbacks against that. But the trouble is that there's very much a sense that if you want to say the Seleucids were doing things that were, innovative, it tends to mean that you are coming from the classic side and you're looking at the Greek and Roman sources. And there's a little bit of almost like it has some racism flavors. That's what I'm going to be honest about.
Classics.
It can have some real racism flavors, and it tends to privilege Macedonianness. This idea that the Seleucids were drawing on Macedonian antecedents. I think they were, to be clear. I think we definitely see elements of Philip II, Alexander's father's policies in consolidating Macedonian territory in the way that the Seleucids rule. But we also see enormous amounts of Achaemenid predecessor institutions in it. And we have to make space for both of those things. Unfortunately, that's not as much fun as picking a side. So in my work, I am trying to find a way to conceptualize institutions that look like they are the same as what the Persians were doing, but function, in my opinion, and as I argue, very differently because of structural problems that the Seleucids had ruling a space they didn't really have strong claims to. And I don't think we can say that the Persians and the Seleucids had the same concerns. They're very, very different dynasties, the Achaemenids and the Seleucids. They're coming from very different positions. You see some shared problems with territorial loss, but that's really just big empire problems. The Romans have that too. When you rule enough land, people revolt. And when it's not ethnically homogenous, it's harder to rule. So it's very easy to look at, say, the Ptolemies in Egypt and say, well, they're not dealing with as much revolt. That's clearly a stronger state. Well, Egypt is used to being ruled as a consolidated unit. It is, while not ethnically homogenous, more ethnically homogenous than Seleucid Asia, and it's much smaller. It's very densely populated, but it is a much smaller area. So there's a desire to compare Ptolemaic Egypt with the Seleucid Empire that will always have the Seleucids coming out looking like a mess. And while at times, yes, the Seleucids are the hot mess express, that is not to say that the Ptolemies are ubiquitously doing a great job.
I mean, the Ptolemies did a lot of my simplest joke was going to be the amount of like interfamily marriage the Ptolemies were doing. Like, I don't know, that they don't
Incest
seem like the
is
peak.
wincest.
I don't understand. I want someone. I need to find a Ptolemaic Egypt scholar who can explain it to me, because every time I'm teaching Ptolemaic Egypt, which I insist on doing when I teach our intro to Greek history, I'm like, okay, guys, so you know how normally when the Greeks are doing something weird as a cultural practice, I say that that's normal to them. The sibling incest isn't. I don't know why they're doing this.
The
This
Greeks
is very
didn't do
strange.
that.
Yeah.
Like, what? Why? There must be an explanation here. Someone will tell me. One day. Send me angry emails about this, listeners. It boggles my mind. But also, I think it's like the last 8 Ptolemies, it's just absolutely falling apart. You have multiple kings feuding against each other. There's one of the Ptolemies, I think it's like Ptolemy the Ninth maybe, isn't real. It gets really wacky. I'm not making this up. There is a Ptolemaic king. One of the Ptolemies is
Fake.
He's fake. He's something that historians made up and then had to redact, but we now can't fix the numbering because if you change the numbering, all scholarship would be uninterpretable.
So there's like, just it jumps to 10 because 9 isn't real?
I believe there is one king who was like an infant son who they thought was technically a co-ruler, and then they were like, oh no, we were off. We're sorry. We shouldn't have done that. He does not count.
It's almost
so
like
he
naming
gets
all of your kids Ptolemy and Cleopatra was going to always cause some problems.
Look, I will say, like, incest is wincest, but also nobody fights like family. So maybe there's a problem.
The family that marries together stays together? I don't know.
Dies together?
Yeah. It's
They're messy bitches.
Odd one. They really were. The last 50, 100 years of that just gets almost absurd in a way where when I teach it, it's just me going, and then the Romans had to intervene, and then they killed another Ptolemy, and then it's just like one thing after another. Who has Cyprus now? The other Ptolemy. They're both ruling at the same time. And yeah, they're all named Ptolemy. It's becomes this disaster. But the Seleucids, who have at least 2 names,
technically,
yeah,
technically,
yes,
they win. The Ptolemies did too. Well, but Ptolemy had, I mean, I guess they had 2 names, but Cleopatra doesn't totally count because it's feminine.
Yeah, they had two
male
names for their kings. Yes,
okay.
yes,
well, that is nice.
A 100% improvement.
That's true. Yeah.
And I think there are 2 or 3 names for women.
Ooh.
Yeah, when I think of like Hellenist, I know I should think Cleopatra, but I always think of like Berenike.
I was gonna say Egypt has 2. Ptolemies have 2 because Berenike and Cleopatra. So yeah, there's that at least.
At least one of the Berenikes ends up in Seleucid world and causes a war.
I love her.
It's a really the Ptolemies and the Seleucids have major beef over the southern Levant. In a way that becomes really not fun to teach, because I'm just like, okay, so we have another Syrian war, and I watch everyone's faces just drop, and they're like, another Syrian war and I'm like, yeah, this is the 4th, and it's just it keeps going.
God.
And at one point we like skip a Syrian war, and I'm something like, we're at 6. You couldn't have given them other names. No, it's Hellenistic history, all the same name.
Yeah,
we give them numbers. And this is part of why no one wants to study Hellenistic history. It does make you feel very clever when you have them all memorized. I say not having memorized the Ptolemies clearly.
Oh, so fair.
That's not my business.
No. So what are the two Seleucid names? I realize we got the idea that there are two.
The two Seleucid names are Seleucus and Antiochus.
Okay. So,
right.
Is that where Antioch got the name?
Yes.
Great.
Which Antioch are you thinking of?
The one in Turkey?
Which Antioch are you?
I was gonna say, are they both in Turkey?
There are so many.
Yeah,
so
they're like Alexandrias.
Yeah, they're like Alexandrias.
I was thinking there's ones that are famous for mosaic floors. Yes.
Oh, Antakya.
That's the one I think. Oh.
Yes.
Right, because that's its Turkish name.
That's its modern Turkish name. Yeah, that is indeed, and that's my personal favorite. Antioch. So excellent choice.
Great. I mean, it's the only one that I can remember exists, and I know because of the mosaics, and they're beautiful.
They're so beautiful. I don't know if the Hatay Archaeological Museum, which is the archaeological museum in Antakya, is open yet / anymore after the earthquake several years ago.
Yeah.
But it is truly, it was like it's a magical experience.
Oh.
The mosaics in Eastern Turkey are
I really want to go to Turkey.
I'm just like, sorry, you talked about museums being closed, and I booked a trip to Berlin for a reading break because I decided anytime a man inflicts his mental illness on me, I get to go to Europe. So
that's gonna cost a lot of money.
This is what everyone is saying. So, but anyways, I'm going to Berlin. It was a very like spur of the moment. Nah, I'm booking it right now. And then I check, and the one museum I want to go to, the Pergamon Museum, it's closed till 2027. I'm like, yeah, okay.
Do not hold your breath. I have been waiting to go to the Pergamon Museum and see the altar since 2015.
Oh my god. Germany's supposed to have it together.
Well, they are. However, this renovation has clearly taken them much longer than they expected.
Oh my god.
It was supposed to open, the last time I checked, it was supposed to open this year. It's clearly not open.
Oh.
I will say, what they did have on exhibit in 2015, which may have changed, was really cool. There's like a small portion of their collection that's open. A lot of it is not, I mean, none of it's the altar.
Yeah.
But it was fabulous. It's still a magical experience.
I'm sure. I don't know. I mean, like, I'll find out what to do in Berlin. Maybe I'll just go to a bunch of clubs and be like, what the fuck is this 5-story club?
I'm sure they have a lot of other stolen Greek relics in other museums. Because,
pottery collection, the Greek pottery collection at, I am not going to remember the Greek name for it, the German name for it. One of the state museums in Berlin was one of the most fun collections. Where you know how sometimes Greek pottery has like hilarious motifs on it?
Mm-hmm.
They definitely were perfectly happy to display the pieces that are a little bit silly or like just like
real
quirky, real moments of daily life. They clearly were not focusing on only like beautiful mythological scenes. It'll be like man supported by boy as he vomits in the gutter, and I was like, yes, this is incredible. So I have a bunch of photos of those from when I visited. It was just very joyous. Beautiful. As an experience. Highly recommend. I think they have a papyri collection somewhere, but papyri often aren't fun to look at.
Yeah, no.
It's all chicken scratch if you're not there with a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the pottery are really great.
I'll find the pottery.
Yeah.
I like pots. That'll be good. Land.
Okay, so I love land.
I'm saying so fair.
Michaela loves like lamp. It all goes
all
together.
Right. We don't need to get into that. So this is just really because I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm going to the res that I've been thinking about this a lot because it's so interesting to me, because there's like that empire colonizing vibe, right?
Yeah.
And so, where have my words gone? They've gone into the abyss. That sort of like, the British Empire comes and get off the land. Here, you can have the shitty bit of land. Boom. But there's like that lack of relationship, I guess, like there's no sort of ancestral tie. So I'm curious if like how that affects, because you were talking about the management of the land and stuff, and like the lack of like, well, I don't want to say, because I'm not quite sure if I don't know enough about the like Achaemenids and the Persian Empire, where like I can't say for certain if they, treated the land with respect as the very wooey First Nations during stewardship sort of thing. But how did that change with the Seleucids coming in, being not Persian, being Greek? And yeah, go for it.
Related question too.
Okay.
How much settling of the land was going on?
Yeah. Were they kicking people out?
The perfect setup for
were
what
there
I wanted
reserves?
To say.
Were there?
No. So one of the things that I always want to emphasize when I talk about ancient imperialism in general, but particularly the Seleucid Empire, where it is very much what we code as like a Western power coming into Eastern territory. It feels very modern British imperialism, modern European imperialism. I do not think that what we have in the Seleucid world is what we now call settler colonialism. I don't think we have the same kind of mass scale displacement. We don't have any real indications under the Seleucids that they engaged in massive movement of populations, except when they were sometimes trying to found new cities. So sometimes they would sort of scoop people up and move them to found a new city, but it was not forcing them necessarily into like more peripheral areas so much as they were trying to create new economic centers. I do not want to say that the Seleucids were doing some kind of weird benevolent imperialism and everything was great. I am not saying that. We know perfectly well that there's not really any good empire. But we don't have the same systems of kicking locals off land that we see particularly in like North America, in the American and Canadian contexts. There's no sense that they want locals gone. Local institutions of power are in many, many cases incorporated into the Seleucid Empire and sort of become co-opted into it. So we see the Seleucids working with both, the cities of Western Asia Minor that are Greek, but also, the Babylonian temples that run cities in ancient Mesopotamia. This is, I think, something that they get from Alexander, where Alexander largely returns power to local kings and rulers and rules through them, sort of co-opts them into empire. And the Seleucids very much stick with that. And again, this is where Seleucids as the weak man of the ancient world comes from. So you very much have a world where you have a group of Greek and Macedonian colonizers, spread throughout a world that is essentially still populated by the same people who were living in it under Persian rule. And in some ways, this is very different from what the Persians were doing because we do not have a lot of evidence for Achaemenid colonization. So we have a development of sort of hybrid cultures that include elements of Greco-Macedonianness and local culture, local practices that are so fascinating. So we have, for example, it's called the Greco-Babyloniaca, and I'm going to swap this. I want to say that it is Akkadian written in Greek letters.
Whoa.
And it's going to, I will email you afterwards and say, Michaela, take this out if I'm wrong. But you have these sort of moments where you see things that are clearly pulling on both sides of the culture. So I have a papyrus that I've been working on for a long time that I'm republishing. And it's from Egypt. But what's incredibly fascinating about it is that it is a contract leasing land that seems to have belonged to the Ptolemaic queen at the time. And it is in Greek, but the format of the contract is the same as Demotic Egyptian contracts. So it looks nothing like a Greek lease of land. And it's clearly borrowing this native Egyptian form. So we have all of these weird moments where people are negotiating this multicultural world. And there does not seem to be a lot of investment on the Seleucid part in getting rid of like local language. They have no interest in sort of homogenizing, tax codes or practices. There's all kinds of funky little local things going on that makes it very hard to reconstruct Seleucid policy, but definitely suggests that the Seleucids are practicing empire very differently from how we might imagine in sort of the settler colonialist mindset. We still have colonization, but it's not driven by displacement.
We this reminds me, we did a couple episodes on, I think it was primarily Seleucids, but it was Hellenistic with Eduardo Garcia Molina like a few years ago. Yeah, and this is the thing I remember taking away from it most, so I'm glad to hear it again and I didn't remember wrong, but just this idea that, I mean, it's just so interesting now coming from the world we live in, because we assume that this kind of colonization comes with this attempt to stamp out and like the culture that existed before, right? And I think that is probably almost certainly just so tied to the Christianity, but the broad, obviously the Christianity, but the idea that exists within Christianity that it is the only one, and that that you are like somehow doing people a favor by giving it to them when they don't want it. And like that's what's so interesting to me, because once you take that element out, this like superiority, this supremacy, then you just get people who are like really keen to rule a lot of land, and like I don't get that either, but it's very different than this desire to stamp out an existing culture. And yeah, it's so interesting and odd and like nice to hear about something like this, where I mean, you still have the issues of colonization, absolutely, but you lack that violence against culture, and yeah, I mean, from my memory, there's a lot of like melding in temples and things too, just like combining gods and combining culture, and I think that's so. I mean, I don't want to say beautiful, because obviously it still has these issues, but compared to how
it's refreshing to what we're used to.
Exactly. Compared to modern settler colonialism, be it in North America or elsewhere, like the big difference is, this kind of respect to a degree of the culture that existed before. And like, it's sad that is so refreshing, but it is.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is great about the Hellenistic period is that in learning about it, it prompts people to think about how it is different from modern imperialism. And in my experience, basically all of the students I teach, everyone I work with, is having or has had some kind of experience of empire. And what I love about teaching ancient empire is that it always prompts people to talk about their own experiences, think about how they are bringing that to the creation of new knowledge. So oh God, many years ago now, 6 years ago, good Lord, I taught a class on ancient empires. And what came out of it with my students was that the way we talk, particularly about, say, Athenian Empire, is so different. Oh, Michaela, you've heard this spiel. It's so different from how we talk about any modern empire, but also even the Persian Empire, other ancient empires, in that we always talk about the Athenians as though they were like bringing civilization to the savages, basically. That's like, no, they were forcibly ruling other Greeks. What are you talking about?
Yeah. And I also think they were really bad at empire.
I think they're kind of okay at it. They're sort of pioneering a new version.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of beginner mistakes, rookie errors.
Yeah.
But there's this way that Athenian imperialism has become intellectually attached to British and American imperialism in a way that fundamentally shapes how scholars talk about it as benevolent imperialism, because particularly in the Anglophone part of the academy, a lot of them are American or British, and
they have a positive view of empire. Like, we can say it.
I don't think it's even that they would consciously say they have a positive view of empire. I think it's that they have absorbed that some things are acceptable to do if you are, quote unquote, helping.
Yeah.
It's very like, as someone who came of age in the early noughts, it's bringing democracy to, the Middle East. It's okay if we start a forever war because we're deposing tyrants. And that's sort of what the Athenians are doing, is that they are deposing local governments and installing democracies, which is so American. And I think it's very hard as an American scholar to not feel that twinge there. So there's this amazing article that I always have my students read about Athenian colonization. That's on the Athenian Clerices by Alfonso Moreno. And Michaela knows this because Michaela has read it. It is essentially Moreno deconstructing this benevolent view of Athenian colonization and talking about how this must have been one of the most resented policies within the Athenian Empire of the 5th century, because it is specified in the this inscription known as the sort of, what it's like, the Constitution of the Second Athenian Confederacy. Yay. Basically, they start another league in the 370s, and the Athenians have to specifically apologize for certain bad things what they did in the 5th century.
We're sorry.
They're so sorry. So they specifically say they will not set up any new clerices. Yeah. But, big asterisk, they get to keep these 3 that they already have. That's okay, but no new ones. And the extent to which this gets discussed in the document to Moreno means that it's very clear that this is something everyone was still mad about and worried about happening again. Now, point of order, it absolutely starts happening again as soon as the Athenians have this alliance that they can use as an empire, so everyone's right to be worried. But the way that it is constructed as a solution for land hunger and like putting assets in the hands of landless Athenians, a very democratic practice because it's giving land to, the urban poor. One, not true. Clericies are not given to the urban poor. Two, completely ignores the fact that that land very much explicitly belonged to other people. And that we do know. The Athenians were very much displacing local peoples. Sometimes slaughtering the entire island and displacing them.
Great island. I visited it this summer. Loved it.
It's nice. It looks like the moon in some places.
That's lovely.
Yeah, Syracuse.
Terrible things happen there.
Yeah.
Such as life.
But all of this had to be packaged in a certain way to disguise the ways in which criticizing the Athenian Empire would be criticizing British and contemporary American imperialism.
Yeah.
So what I love about the study of ancient empire is that it prompts people to think about their own experiences of empire, how it shapes the discipline, and it usually ends up being like incredibly compelling conversations. I'm very excited to get to teach my class on ancient empires again in the spring.
Of all the times to do it,
yes.
This is gonna be a year.
Have so much fun.
Honestly, though, I think that it'll be very cathartic to teach that.
I hope so.
Yeah. I hope so for you.
Yeah, there's a tiny part of me that's like, wow, I shouldn't be teaching this. When it comes to ancient empire, I feel like my students bring really so much to the table and will always point out things that are sort of invisible to me as someone who's very much submerged in it.
Yeah. This is why I'm like want to avoid any empire study, because I also feel like I just have too many I guess ingrained hurt feelings to be.
That's putting it nicely.
Yeah.
Generational trauma is also a term, but I like ingrained hurt feelings.
I inherited them. That like I feel like I see empire and I'm just like, I could do it better. And only because I don't know, I've been reading R.F. Kuang. She wrote her first book series starts with the Poppy War, and the main character is just full of so much rage in a way that I'm like, yeah, this would be me if I had power. And so it's probably best if I don't have power, and if somebody puts this character down. I think she needs peace. I don't think she's getting it in life. But hey, empire. What's your favorite bit about empire?
Loaded question.
What's your favorite bit about the Seleucid Empire?
So, what I am really fascinated by in the Seleucid Empire, setting aside land, so land was sort of my first book project that I'm wrapping up. I got to, okay, so the thing that no one tells you about writing a PhD dissertation is that when you finish it, you absolutely hate what you're working on.
Oh, yeah.
You never want to see it again. Yeah. And if you are successful, you're about to spend the next 5 years with it.
Sounds about right.
Completely beyond the point. It's basically like you are staying with your dissertation topic for the kids. And you're finally going to get a divorce when you get tenure. But you got to get the book published first. So I do, I love land. I have done so much work on, institutions for land, of land. I'm really interested in leasing land, but I'm sick of it. So it's no longer my favorite part. I'm really interested in the specific ways of interacting commercially, how economy can become multicultural, what the institutions are. That sounds very vague. Basically, in Seleucid Mesopotamia, you have a bunch of practices that very clearly emerge in the Hellenistic period in specific response to empire. So it's things like you have a lot of people who use multiple names.
Ooh.
And sometimes it's two Akkadian names, sometimes it's an Akkadian name and a name that's maybe Persian or from like a different Semitic language. But my favorite flavor is when they have an Akkadian name and a Greek name. And I'm deeply compelled by the idea that your name can change based on the context that you're in. And the idea that you are negotiating your identity for like maximum economic profit is such a wow, okay. And in some ways, we all do that where the person someone might be on Reddit is very different from the person they might be, in the office.
Most cases. That one,
you better be. But this idea of multiple selves as a response to empire is very compelling to me. The other weird little practice that I have been poking around at for many years is these little clay coin copies where it's like someone has taken actual coins and made a mold and then made an object in clay from the mold as an exact copy of the coin, which is a bizarrely difficult thing to do. That's like a multi-stage project.
Yeah.
Why are they doing that? And I have a crackpot theory that this is specifically a way to keep accounts if the skilled artisan is not literate in the local language. Because we have these incredibly polyglot communities where, in Mesopotamia, you have at least Greek and Aramaic floating around in, the 3rd and 2nd centuries. You probably have other Semitic languages. In theory, you could have Akkadian speakers. We don't think a lot of people are speaking Akkadian at that time, but it is being written. So there's this accumulation of options for what you could be writing in and what you could be speaking. But presumably each workshop had one language that they kept accounts in. And not necessarily all the people who worked there could write it. So I think that this was meant to aid the individuals who could not write it, but were still like very skilled and needed to be able to count things. So this is sort of the second book project, who I'm going to get together with when I finally get my dissertation divorce. Thinking about the idea of a hybrid Greco-Babylonian economy. Babylonia is sort of southern Mesopotamia. And
so
how
far. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's so far from Greece. I'm obsessed.
I like ran away from Greece when I started my graduate studies. It was one of those very strange things where, I am a Greek historian by training and when I teach, but the rest of the time I am essentially a historian of West and Central Asia, which is very exciting, but also doesn't have a natural disciplinary home. But there's so much good stuff happening in that part of the world, and it is such a huge part of the Greek world in the Hellenistic period. So I always have more things to think about, more things to do. Yeah.
I'm so glad that is being studied broadly. This is something that we've talked about on the show a lot, and just like trying to pull it in where we can. I mean, obviously all of this started from mythology, so I just kind of whoever I can get to talk to me about this stuff, to both of us. But like, I just think that the overall expanse of not only like the the empires of the Hellenistic period, but just broadly like the connectivity of the Med and then so far beyond is one of the most like interesting and underrepresented thing in the wider public. Like if unless you are in this world very specifically, you just think of Greece as, Greece and maybe into Turkey. Sure, you can, like, we think of the Greek colonies on the coast of Turkey, like, but nothing beyond. And I mean, yeah, like you've said, the Hellenistic period isn't studied all that enough anyway, but the expanse of the Seleucids, like I wouldn't have been able to guess that they would have gone that far into like what is modern Iraq and beyond. Like that's unreal. And I try to say that just because I want to remind people where all of these places are in the world now. But like, yeah, I mean, it's just so I'm absolutely obsessed. The idea that we could have like this combination of like languages and people and all of this is just super cool. And like, what a reminder on what long a time period we're considering too when it comes to like, I mean, it's so hard to keep track of it because the Mesopotamia was around for so many thousands of years, like before the Greeks doing crazy stuff. And then so by the time you get here, you're like, oh, like these people are very late in their overall like existence in this realm. And then suddenly the Greeks are coming in and discovering them. And it's just so interesting.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about talking to people who study Mesopotamia is that they will talk about timescapes that just precede anything that we could possibly study in Greece. I mean, there are people who do it, but they're all like prehistorians,
Yeah.
where people will tell me about things happening in the 3rd millennium BCE, and I'm just like, I have never thought about those numbers. Amazing that you have written words.
The only thing I could think of Greece from those numbers, which I really have to say because I thought of this recently and I think it's the perfectly silliest example, is like the only thing offhand that I can say is from 3rd century BCE is the little hedgehog in the National Archaeological Museum of Athens. He's from the Cycladic Islands and he's my favorite, and I know that he's from 3rd century. He's that old. 3rd millennia, thank you, not century. Yeah. Or what was it? Yeah, no. Yeah. Well,
yeah, he was
anyway. He's from like yeah. He's like very early.
So did you have a replica of him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not in here, but you can you think of the hedgehog we're talking about? Do you know him?
No.
He's holding a little bowl. Oh, he's utterly delightful. He's holding a little bowl. He's got funny little stripes. He's this cutest little guy, and it'll actually lead into my next question. So this is great. I can't wait for you to see him. But he's from the Cycladics, and he's like in the early Cycladic period. I don't even know. It's so early that it's like it was him and some goddess figurines,
Yeah, I can't think of a single thing from Greece in the 3rd millennium BCE. So
unless I'm like completely off on his years, I feel like he's like 28, 29. No, I think he might be 3000.
Yeah, hi. So I just found an article that has a picture of him. That's good.
Great. Does it say when he's from? So I didn't make it up.
My favorite is they call him the zoomorphic thing.
Because he's a weird little guy.
Doesn't say. It's just the first picture. It doesn't say. But no, I know he's. Oh yeah, 3,000 to 1,000. Because I saw one when I was on Kea too. I went to their archaeological museum.
Do they have another one?
Yeah, they have one there. He gets his own little case and everything. And I was just like, I sent you a picture of the guy. I was like, hedgehog. Yeah. I know.
He's so cute.
Okay.
He's my favorite little guy.
To me, he looks like a badger.
I know. I think hedgehog is a stretch.
Badger,
but like, that's what they call him officially. But yeah, he's got some badger vibes. And I do think hedgehogs are more common over there. I don't know. I saw a hedgehog run across the street.
I don't think you have badgers in Greece. Also, English and American badgers look different.
Oh yeah, is it like possums? Like I know there's 2 different possums.
Yeah,
they're all very confusing.
There is badgers in Greece.
Oh,
the Melis, the European badger.
I love this badger deep dive.
They're so cute. Little guy.
Oh, they're so cute.
It reminds me of when I had to go on a brief dive into whether lions existed in Greece in the Archaic period.
Oh, were they?
I believe yes. Yeah.
I cannot remember.
Earlier, I don't think.
Definitely at least earlier, but I would assume still archaic.
It was one of those things related to trying to date Tomb 2 at Vergina.
No, don't do that.
Yes. That's one of those ones where you could not pay me to write an article on it. That's above my pay grade. Very interesting, though.
I love that. I mean,
what was you said that the badger led into the
hedgehog.
hedgehog.
Yeah, I have another.
Yes.
Yeah. So, well, to the listeners, we'll see how we cut this together, but I have posted him before, so I hope you're familiar. But if you're not, you just got to go ahead and you just look up the little hedgehog in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, because he is an utter delight, and he's holding a little bowl. He's my best friend. And I was going to ask, before we even thought of him, which is, again, the oldest thing I could think of in Greece, I wanted to ask, like, I thought, as we get sort of towards the end, I would love to know if there are any, like, silly, weird things, or, like, weird little guy moments in the Seleucid Empire or period, or just anything that are your fun little anecdotes of any sort.
Oh.
Or also sometimes that's too putting people on the spot, and I respect that too.
Is there what's his name? Well, what's his name? The bronze merchant. Is there a bronze merchant but Seleucid?
You're thinking of Ea Nasir.
Yeah.
Yes, but is there him, but in the Seleucids? Is there a funny little guy?
Does anyone accuse anyone else of cheating them on bronze ingots?
I spend so much time with the exact same little guys, none of whom are particularly entertaining.
But they're your little guys.
Any inbreeding, like the Ptolemies? I don't know.
So, okay, the story that I am going to tell, this is about wives and divorce.
Ooh, thrilling.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So, okay. So this is a story about wives and divorce, but it's also a story about scholarly malpractice.
Yay!
I like that
which
too.
I sort of love about it. Antiochus II was originally married to a woman who we call Laodike. We call many, many women Laodike, and they all get numbers, but they're not actually numbered in a sensible way. It's just one after the other, so I'm not going to give you a number, but
there's also a lot of those in mythology, I have to say. Yeah, I've come across that name 1,000 times. Also, it just means like, I looked it up recently, and it doesn't matter, but
I guess it would be like justice of the people.
Yeah.
It's basically just like a fancy pants Macedonian lady name. Which is true of like a lot of the Macedonian queens in the various Hellenistic kingdoms, where they maybe had other real names.
But they took on fancy ones. Yeah.
Laodike. He's originally married to her. And later on, we know that he married Berenike, who was the daughter of one of the Ptolemies. So, historically, as in the 20th century CE, this marriage to Berenike happened after he had divorced Laodike. And so there was a whole narrative that they had a rancorous divorce, and there is an inscription in which Antiochus II is giving Laodike a large amount of land for a relatively low price, and people call this her divorce settlement. And it is basically still known by that name. So, the problem here is that the only ancient sources that attest to a divorce are very, 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 very late. I don't have the exact century in my head, but certainly no earlier than, say, like 3rd century CE, if not significantly later. And Antiochus II ruled between like 261 to 246 BCE.
Right. So we're talking 500 years-ish.
Yeah. they did not know what was going on. But there was this idea that he surely must have gotten divorced. Now, what you need to know about the Macedonian kings is, so specifically the Macedonian kings in northern Greece, in Macedonia, we know they practice polygamy.
Mm-hmm.
Philip II had something like
7, I think it was.
7 wives? Yeah.
I think so.
Not that most of them matter, but we know that he is married to many, 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 many women. We know Alexander was married to at least 2, I think maybe 3 that we know of. So it's very clear that the Macedonians, as elites, seem to have practiced polygamy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not normal among Greeks. As far as we know, southern and central Greeks did not practice polygamy. So the default expectation was that if Antiochus II was going to marry a second woman, he must have gotten divorced from the first one. But in a Macedonian context, that's ridiculous if we don't have any evidence for a divorce except for the divorce settlement. Now, if you actually look at the divorce settlement, he is selling her land. And yeah, it's cheap, but one, we don't really have a good sense of land value.
Mm-hmm.
There aren't a lot of good comparisons to make. Also, when it's a divorce settlement, you just give it to her. She doesn't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
That
feels like a weird capitalist invention thing of like, oh, she has to pay like a $1 just to, pay whatever nonsense. But like, why would they do that?
Such a weird construction to put on this text.
Yeah.
So there is this great article by Lauriane Martinez-Sèvres, who is a French scholar, where she basically goes through and very carefully deconstructs these various parts. She basically makes the argument that I've just explained to you now in the mid-2000s. And this is sort of like this weird watershed moment where everyone's like, oh, we made something up. Oh, that's our bad. Because she's obviously right.
Yeah. There's like zero evidence for a divorce. Yeah.
Zero evidence. And there are, in fact, multiple texts where after the so-called divorce, she's called the queen. She's repeatedly called the queen. Like,
right.
There's one where she's called the queen. There's another where she's referred to as a wife. In multiple languages. Like this is both in Greek and Akkadian. She in the divorce settlement, she is Queen Laodike. There's another thing where she's granting land a few years later, and there she's specifically described as a wife. I was just like, what, do you? And literally, I have read a commentary where it's like, wife means that she was not the queen and was divorced. I was like, no, words have meaning.
What do you?
It was wild.
That
I felt insane.
I understand that.
So we have to reconsider what this text means, and that's, I'm just gonna sidebar that because it's not cute and fun. It's kind of boring and involves me talking about like land ownership in really technical ways, which I'm happy to do recreationally, but you don't need that happening on your time. So I love this weird little moment as like a history weird little guy.
Yeah.
But what's also fun is that this second marriage is such a bad idea because it gives the Ptolemies claim to the Seleucid kingdom. Very bad idea. That it basically, upon Antiochus II's death, results in a war between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids because Laodike's son inherits, and then Ptolemy comes in and says, no, Berenike's son is going to inherit. We need to fix this. And so it becomes an entire mess. Which, and I'm tying this back, is actually the basis of my theory on why the Ptolemies only marry within the family. Because if you're marrying your brother or your sister, you're not creating competing claimants to the throne. And this is a major issue in both the Macedonian dynasty, like Alexander's mother, Olympias, supposedly poisons his half brother Aridaeus to get him out of the way because he is the only like living alternative heir to Philip II's throne. And obviously, you see a lot of competition within the Seleucids. There is a whole thing that's called the War of the Brothers between two sons of one of the Seleucid kings. And the Ptolemies try to eliminate this, in my mind, by marrying each other. Does it work? Absolutely not. But that is the only explanation that I have ever made up for myself that explains it. So one of the other things that I love about the Hellenistic period is that it is 99% shenanigans.
Oh,
and this is what I want.
It's the Real Housewives of...
Yeah. Well, because also wasn't there like, I mean, the post Alexander like war that led to Seleucids versus Ptolemies versus everybody else, like, yeah, so they had like a big ass war because he didn't leave an heir. There had been drama before him about who was going to be Philip II's heir, and then if they're all so power driven that they're willing to do all of this, it really makes sense that the Ptolemies would be like, well, I guess we just get to fuck our sisters instead because there's no better option.
That's what happens. When you have 50 years of war, you have to fuck your sister.
And then just name everybody Ptolemy, Cleopatra, Berenike, and nothing else.
If you only use the one name, you can't mix up your kids' names.
No, but exactly. Or your brother. Husband, child.
Husband. You know, as someone like, oh my God, my family. So, youngest of three, me and my oldest sister, we look exactly alike. My oldest sister and middle sister, their names are basically the same. They're Danae, Deanna, and then Michaela. My dad wants to name me Diana.
Unhinged.
Dumbass.
We've
Danae,
talked about
Deanna, Diana.
Unhinged idea.
Who does that?
But also,
it's absurd.
A Roman name for you?
Yeah.
No.
Offensive.
It would have been named after Princess Di. That's where
better.
It came from.
94.
But she wasn't. Yeah. But the amount of times I would be called by, first of all, anytime I entered a new school, they were like, oh no, another Smith girl. And I'm like, hey, I'm the best one. Don't wait for this. And the amount of teachers who would just be like, Danae. And I'd just be like, oh, that's not me. And then poor Deanna. Danae would be called Deanna, and I'd be called... Nobody could get us right. So you know what? Actually, I'm on the Ptolemy side for this. Just use the one name. Just
no,
it's fine.
But then who's who?
Yeah, that's your own problem.
Well, that's
then you're getting into like Ptolemy the younger, Ptolemy the older, Ptolemy the middle child.
It's just number them. You know what? Actually, let's just keep the numbers. Then you could just call them 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 17, 37, 49.
How many brother-sister couples are there?
Enough.
I mean, I love a divorce story. I love ranting about how many Ptolemies there are, but that's just a great theory on why they're always marrying their sisters. It just, I don't know. I do think I'm excited to learn more about the Hellenistic period because what little things I do learn like are just so wacky. And you know, I mean, my experience is so deep in the mythology, but even, you know, I mean, I'm thinking of the only thing I can off the top of my head name of the Argonautica being like a text that I've read from the Hellenistic period. And it's also pretty fun and wacky. I don't know. I like that it's something that was actually like intentionally written. It's like one of the first times we have like an epic in Greece where we know who wrote it and like why, and kind of, I don't know. That's me connecting the only thing I have from the Hellenistic period. But I'm just generally fascinated by how far they stretched their empires and like, they were just doing wild and wacky things. Do we have any other, like, I don't know, you said shenanigans. Are there any other well, we do need to wrap it up eventually, but I'm keen on shenanigans too.
I have to.
Oh
Yes.
yeah.
Do you want to? We can
Yes.
also wrap it up.
You have important things to do. There's like an infinite well of shenanigans. It is truly the Real Housewives of, Iraq. Um,
Really?
and
Delight.
I think that's sort of great about it. It's once you start talking about it, it's very easy to like pull people in, because it doesn't seem like things that the ancient world should be doing. And you have those moments in sort of classical history with Athens. You have your Alcibiades, um, but there is less silliness to it. Um, Not that I think most Hellenistic historians would necessarily describe it as silly. But there's a rapid fire, unending barrage of events energy to it, where it's never quiet. Things don't really settle down until Rome just sort of puts its giant hand on top of the situation. It's like, okay, settle down. Um, and I think that's really fun. I think it's fun to see them sort of gallivanting around. It's very much Alexander the Great's like enormous weird legacy, where he just changes not just ancient Greece, but the history of places like Egypt and Turkey and Iraq and Afghanistan and India. And he's just touching all of these different cultures that, like Michaela said before, end up with these mythologies of Alexander, who stops being a historical figure in a lot of ways and just becomes sort of a mythological hero type. Um, and I think that's incredibly compelling. And
Mm-hmm.
it's still really something that we are engaging in today with sort of modern reception of Alexander. Um, but he sort of becomes the end point a lot of the time, when in fact, there is so much more going on right after him
Mm-hmm.
in such an enormous part of the world, and it is so interconnected with places, like India, um, maybe China. I'm
Wow.
putting an asterisk on that. Um, but just a version of the ancient world that's much bigger than the way we think about things, and that's sort of the current shift in thinking about ancient history within classics is thinking about what we call global antiquity, which is sort of what it sounds like. It's
Mm-hmm.
antiquity on the ancient world on a global scale, thinking about how Greece is connected to other places, also Italy. Yes, let's remember Rome exists as well.
I mean, we don't
Um,
have to. It's fine. They
okay,
know it.
I I may or may not have structured my entire career around pretending that Rome doesn't exist.
Oh my
That's
god,
so
I
cute.
love that. Kind of me too, but in
Yeah,
an outwardly joking way where I just have
right.
other people come and tell me things and I'm like, "Cool, Rome sounds terrible. I'm going to go back to Greece."
The truth is we can outsource that to other people,
Yeah.
and that's amazing for us. um so basically, this idea that it's no longer acceptable for ancient history to mean the study of Italy and Greece as countries in the
Mhm.
ancient past. We now need to think about ancient history as something that includes other places.
Wow.
And I know that on some level that sounds like so basic.
Oh, I know,
But
but
it is a huge intellectual shift that we are only starting to make. People are only starting to work on these like big ancient world ideas. In the past, okay, I'm being a little dramatic, but it has really picked up in the
Yeah.
past few decades. For a long time, there were very, very, very few scholars who worked on this. I think it has more uptake in Europe, than it does in North America.
hmm.
But I think we are finally seeing shifts where there is growing interest in thinking about particularly connections with, you know, West Asia, with North Africa, which are really the gimme connections. But We also see sort of like a flourishing of, sorry, I'm going to talk about Rome again. Connections between the Roman Empire and the Han Empire in China. So that's like a whole cottage industry of really fascinating work thinking about sort of the structure of empire, and comparative empire studies is starting to take off. So there's a lot of super interesting work there that's coming down the pipeline that I'm excited to be part of.
Well, you just wrapped that up so freaking beautifully. That's so great. I mean, I'm thrilled to know. I'm thrilled to get more people to talk with us on the show, because I think that has over time become one of my big obsessions, is just like screaming that into everyone's ears, that just the wider connectivity, just this constant and perhaps annoying, but I don't care, reminder that like Greece and Rome did not exist in a bubble, and any kind of conceptualizing like that is so racist and weird and also just like wrong and dumb. So I'm thrilled to have the alternatives and to know that there's more and more of this coming down. Comparative empires sounds like what a fucking topic. Whew. Yeah. It's Michaela, do you have anything before we like tie things up in a nice little bow?
Brain dead. Brain thinking about 20th century Italy.
Yeah, you got an exam coming up. This has been so interesting and so much fun, and Michaela has a lot of editing to do because we went on a couple of joyful tangents looking at hedgehogs. There's nothing wrong with that. That's all the best episodes.
Love the hedgehog.
But thank you so much for doing this. Do you have anything you want to share with listeners about like where they can read more from you or anything that's coming up?
Unfortunately, I do not have anything coming out immediately. Feel free. I'm very, very earnest about getting angry emails about the Ptolemies. Feel free to Google me and hit me up. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great time. I had an amazing time chatting. Yeah.
I'm so glad that we had, so much fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was me waiting for you.
Oh my.
Let's Talk About Myths, Baby is written and produced by Liv Albert. Michaela Panguish is the Hermes to all your Olympians, the producer, sometimes writer, and does other things occasionally. Select music by Luke Chaos. Thank you, Luke. The podcast is part of the Memory Collective Podcast Network, a collection of creators that all strive to bring you accurate and reliable information on the ancient world and everything that's going on there. These include the wonderful friends at Movies We Dig, the Partial Historians, Sweet Bitter, and so much more. Get ad-free episodes and so much more by subscription to the Oracle Edition on Patreon at patreon.com/mythsbaby or via the link in the episode's description. Lots of stuff happens over at Patreon. We have chats and, send pictures, memes, etc. Say hello to each other. And at some point I will start streaming a live stream of ACO. I'm just currently exhausted with finals. Anyways, that's all we have for this episode. See you next week. Bye-bye.